Okay, Bruno and I are here. And Bruno, what are we going to talk about today? What's that? Bruno wants to talk about the effects of intermittent fasting on weight loss or fat loss. Okay, Bruno, take it away. Go ahead. Go ahead. All right. All right. Go ahead. Go ahead. All right. Like I said, internet. I've talked about intermittent fasting in previous videos. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details here. I've also discussed a lot of the nuances and much more in-depth effects of internet fasting. Internet fasting. Actually, that's not a bad idea. It's a good idea to keep away from the internet for a while. It's good for your brain. Get off of Facebook and all the social media. Can do a lot for you, but that's a whole different video. I'm talking about intermittent fasting. I'm going to call it IF, intermittent fasting. I'm going to have an update on it also in my Applied Metabolic newsletter, because since I wrote the last article on IF, there's been some new research showing even more health effects and benefits of I keep saying internet fasting, intermittent fasting, especially related to brain health, longevity, and general health and fitness. So, it requires a kind of update. But in this video, I want to specifically talk about the effects of intermittent fasting on losing body fat and how it affects muscle gains. Just basically to review, in case you don't know what intermittent fasting is, it's like limiting your meals and snacks to a specific time window, usually between 6 and 8 hours of the day. In other words, you eat during these 6 hour or 8 hour periods, and then you don't eat the rest of the time. That's basic intermittent fasting. I'll give you an example. They have something called 16-8 intermittent fasting. It involves restricting food intake to just 8 hours per day and abstaining from eating during the remaining 16 hours. That's a popular method of IF. Other types involve fasting for 24 hours once or twice per week, or significantly cutting calorie intake a few days per week, but eating normally during the others. Those are various ways of engaging in intermittent fasting. Now, the question is, it would seem obvious, really, when you think about it. I mean, if you're restricting caloric intake, surely intermittent fasting would lead to weight loss. But, one question that obviously arises is the weight loss going to be fat, or is it going to be muscle? Usually when people go on diets, it's a combination of both. Especially people that don't exercise, who just lower their calories, if they stay on the diet long enough, they can often have a 50-50 ratio, where they lose 50% fat, 50% muscle, and this is with no exercise. That's terrible. That's terrible. The loss of muscle means the resting metabolic rate goes down, and it guarantees a regain of the lost weight. That's why 95 to 97% of people that go on weight loss diets always regain the weight. Usually it's due to mistakes made during dieting, particularly going on a restricted calorie diet and not doing any exercise, because you need exercise, especially weight training or resistance exercise, to maintain lean mass. Now, does IF help weight loss? Restricting your meals and snacks to a strict time window may naturally decrease your caloric intake, as I said, which right away can lead to some weight loss. But there's some factors involved. Intermittent fasting increases the secretion of norepinephrine, which is a hormone and a neurotransmitter that boosts your metabolism, so you increase caloric burning during the day. Norepinephrine, higher levels of norepinephrine increase resting energy expenditure, which means you burn more calories at rest, so you lose more weight. That's one of the effects of IF. Intermittent fasting also reduces insulin levels, insulin release, I should say. And whenever insulin levels are minimized, you have a greater degree of fat oxidation, because when insulin is secreted, fat in the body is either maintained or synthesized. Of course, insulin alone will not make you fat. You have to have an excess of calories, but most people do. So there's no problem. But if you control insulin with all the things being equal, you get greater fat loss. According to a 2011 review in the journal Obesity Reviews that compared counting calories to intermittent fasting, Intermittent fasting reduced body weight by 8% and decreased body fat levels by 16% over a 3 to 12-week period. So intermittent fasting really does help. Now, what about combining a popular ketogenic diet? Ketogenic diet, of course, involves a very low carbohydrate diet, usually involves 20 grams of carbohydrates a day or less. Is it a good idea? Can it help? Studies show that combining a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting may work even better because intermittent fasting will lower many of the side effects of the ketogenic diet, such as the keto flu. That's what it's called. These symptoms that you get in the first couple of weeks on a ketogenic diet, headaches, fatigue, and all that stuff. Well, if you combine a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting, apparently the food intake that's allowed will mitigate or lessen a lot of the effects of the side effects of ketogenic diet. I should also mention that these initial effects of the ketogenic diet usually disappear after 4 to 5 weeks, even if you don't do any fasting with it, as the body basically has to switch over from using sugar or glucose as a major fuel to using ketones and body fat. That usually takes anywhere from 4 to 7 weeks. Once that happens, you feel a lot better. The health benefits offered by intermittent fasting outweigh even its effect on fat loss. These benefits include improved heart health. Intermittent fasting has been shown to decrease levels of total and low-density lipoprotein cholesterol as well as triglycerides. All of these are risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Most of these cardiovascular disease prevention benefits are related to lower body fat levels and increases of beneficial adipokines such as adiponectin. Intermittent fasting can also support blood sugar control. A small study of 10 people with type 2 diabetes found that intermittent fasting helped to significantly decrease blood glucose levels. And this was shown in a study published in the World Journal of Diabetes in 2017. The intermittent fasting will also decrease inflammation. Systemic inflammation is considered a cornerstone of most major degenerative diseases, including brain diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. Anything that decreases inflammation is good for you. Exercise imparts a lot of its benefits by decreasing systemic inflammation, but so does intermittent fasting. Several studies have found that intermittent fasting can reduce specific blood markers of inflammation, such as various inflammatory cytokines and C-reactive protein. Intermittent fasting also may increase longevity, although research in humans is not really clear on this. Animal studies do suggest that intermittent fasting boosts lifespan and slows the signs of aging. Rat and mice studies show increased longevity with intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting can mimic many of the longevity benefits offered by caloric restriction. Caloric restriction involves reducing your typical daily caloric intake by 30 to 35%, and you never get off this. That's it. You stay on this 35% less calories than you normally eat. It has to be done for life. And animal studies again show that this type of eating extends the lifespan of most species of animals. I was going to say that the studies of humans, however, have not really been done. So, there are people that follow caloric restricted diets, but they're kind of like gambling because there's no evidence that eating in this manner, a very restricted caloric diet is going to actually increase longevity benefits. However, it is known to decrease certain markers that are associated with decreased longevity, including increased insulin, increased blood glucose, increased blood lipids. All of these are lowered when you decrease calories, but a lot of it has to do with a loss of body fat, which of course always occurs when you decrease calories. But the interesting part about all this is some studies seem to indicate that by following intermittent fasting, you can get most of the benefits, probably about 95% of the benefits of caloric restriction without the starvation effect. So, in other words, you could still eat fairly normally on intermittent fasting and still reap the benefits of severe caloric restriction. And also, I should point out just a very recent study of rats which are one of the species that are shown to have increased longevity with caloric restriction. This study showed that if caloric restriction is to extend lifespan, you're not going to believe this. It has to be begun at the start of life. In other words, you'd have to give it to like babies, children. If caloric restriction is started, let's say in middle age, where most people start thinking about extending longevity, well, according to this animal study, restricting calories at that point, it will lower those factors. Like I mentioned, it'll lower body fat, it'll lower insulin levels, it'll lower glucose levels. In that sense, it'll probably help you live a little longer. But the benefits, let's say how can I say it? The metabolic benefits that are shown in animal studies don't occur after middle age. So, if you're doing a caloric restriction program, thinking that it's going to extend that the lack of eating food itself is going to extend your life, you're kind of wasting your time. It's not you're starving yourself for nothing. You'd be much better off to go in an intermittent fasting regime, which will show most of the benefits. I should also point out that much of the benefits, and I've written this in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, much of the benefits offered by intermittent fasting have to do with a process called autophagy. Autophagy, without going into complex detail, involves a clearing out of dead cells, old cells, and this allows the new cells to proliferate, work better, and your body regenerates tissue better, your brain works better, your muscles age much slower. The greatest benefit I would suggest offered by intermittent fasting is increased autophagy. So that's something to consider also. Intermittent fasting, animal studies show that intermittent fasting also helps to protect the brain. It seems to prevent the onset of degenerative brain diseases such as Alzheimer's disease. Again, this is probably related to autophagy and maintenance of mitochondria in the brain. Mitochondria are the energy structures found in cells that produce energy as ATP, and also the site of fat oxidation in cells. There's a lot of has been made or talked about intermittent fasting increasing growth hormone levels, and it does increase growth hormone levels. Anytime you don't every time you don't eat or really lower your calories tremendously, the body will sense this, and it'll take measures to try and protect your lean mass or muscle. And one of the ways it does this is by increasing growth hormone level. However, to get a significant release of growth hormone on a fasting regime, it takes at least 24 hours, because growth hormone won't be released until all of your liver and muscle glycogen stores are fairly depleted. As long as you have energy stores left in your body, the signal will not be sent to kick out a lot of growth hormone. It usually takes at least 24 hours. So you have to be fasting for 24 hours to get a significant release of growth hormone. As far as the effects on muscle growth, some studies have shown that small amounts of lean mass, such as maybe 2 pounds, can be lost after several months of intermittent fasting. But other studies show no loss of lean mass. Why the difference? It's hard to say. I would suggest it's probably because the studies where they showed no lean mass loss while intermittent fasting involves some sort of exercise component. Any type of exercise is going to help maintain lean mass on any kind of diet, including intermittent fasting. A 2011 study found that compared to standard low-calorie diet, intermittent fasting is able to retain greater amounts of lean mass. But intermittent fasting is not the best way to gain muscle. One study that compared normal eating to intermittent fasting found that those in the intermittent fasting retained muscle mass and made strength gains, but those who consume the normal diet gained significantly more muscle, which was traced to a higher consumption of protein compared to the IF regime. In other words, on the intermittent fasting, because you're restricting food over several hours, 6 to 8, 16, even up to 24 hours, your protein feedings become obviously less frequent or non-existent. And a lot of muscle growth is based on regular protein intake. As a matter of fact, according to current studies, to maximize muscle growth, you should be taking in some kind of protein about every 5 hours. And of course, you can't do this on fasting. So as a consequence, you're not going to gain as much muscle. That's the bottom line. And you cannot eat protein while you're on an intermittent fast, because that's then you're breaking the fast. Some of the amino acids are what they call glucogenic. In other words, they could be converted rapidly into glucose, which kills the whole point of intermittent fasting. So that's the reason why you don't gain as much muscle on intermittent fasting, because you can't have your regular protein meals. Engaging in weight training while on an intermittent style of eating goes a long way to helping to retain muscle mass. As I said, on any kind of diet, if you engage in weight training or resistant exercise, it's going to help you maintain muscle mass. It's very, very important. The key to maintaining muscle on any type of diet is to ensure that the weight loss is slower. Don't go for crash dieting, because that always causes muscle loss. You want to aim for a weight loss of no more than 1 to 2 pounds per week. I know it sounds a little slow, but this is what maintains the maximum amount of muscle while dieting. Faster weight loss usually involves initially a loss of water, like when you go on low carbs. The first, let's say, week or two, you're going to lose some glycogen in the muscle and liver, and the glycogen is stored with 2.7 grams of water. So a lot of the weight loss that you experience initially while on a low carb diet is water loss. But after that, if your calories are too low, there's going to be a little bit of muscle loss every week. There's been study of bodybuilders where some of these guys are staying on restricted calorie diets for a very long period of time, and believe it or not, they lost as much as 40% of their muscle mass. And I know what you're thinking. If I take steroids and anabolic drugs, it'll prevent that. Well, it doesn't. Strangely enough, it doesn't. Taking anabolic drugs like growth hormone and anabolic steroids will, without a doubt, minimize muscle loss on any kind of diet. There's no question. But after a certain amount of time, especially as you lose greater amounts of body fat, no matter how many drugs you take, you are going to tap into your muscle mass, and you're going to lose muscle. This also has been shown in studies with bodybuilders who took steroids, but they stayed on extremely low calorie diets, or they not necessarily fasting, but low calorie diets. They stayed on it for many, many weeks, and they all showed losses of muscle despite the anabolic drug regime. So that's about it. So does intermittent fasting help you lose body fat? Without a doubt, it does. I mean, you're not eating anything on these fasts, and anytime you lower calories, the simple fact is, according to the laws of conservation of energy or thermodynamics, you're going to lose body fat when you reduce calories. And intermittent fasting generally involves a loss of a decrease of calorie intake, which leads to a loss of body fat. However, I should also point out there have been some studies that directly compared head-on to intermittent fasting to a low-calorie diet for extended periods, let's say more than 6 months. And what they found was that the fat loss was just about the same. In other words, so there was no real advantage of intermittent fasting for losing body fat compared to, let's say, conventional dieting over an extended amount of time. However, it's also important to point out that the group that did engage in intermittent fasting showed much, much greater health benefits, like the benefits I mentioned earlier, that did not occur with the conventional dieting. In other words, intermittent fasting does things to your body that you can't get with conventional dieting. And again, most of it involves that autophagy process that I mentioned. It's a very important way of balancing out, your body's chemistry, kind of gives your body a break, gives your body a rest, allows it to recuperate. So that's about it for intermittent fasting and fat loss. If you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, food supplements that work, which ones don't, same with fat loss techniques, which ones work, which ones don't, anti-aging research you can use today, women's health and fitness, ergogenic aids, hormonal therapy, all of these are covered in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. Some digital publications cover nutrition pretty adequately, others cover exercise fairly well, but none of them come close to the variety of subjects covered in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. So there's always something in my Applied Metabolics for anyone, whether you're a bodybuilder, fitness person, or just somebody that wants to be in good health. You'll get something out of reading my Applied Metabolics newsletter. It's 40 to 50 pages, published on the first of every month. if you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook group, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, general health and medicine. I have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics website where current subscribers could send me brief questions related to anything they might have read in Applied Metabolics or anything they want to know about that they're confused about. I will answer questions only from current subscribers. I don't respond to unsolicited questions. You're welcome to leave comments and suggestions under this video. I do accept suggestions for possible topics for upcoming for new videos. So feel free. But you can also, again, you're welcome to leave questions, but I can't guarantee I'll answer the questions left under the videos. In most cases, I won't, because I just don't have the time. I only have time to respond to questions submitted to current subscribers in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. So that's about it. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, you saw my best friend just earlier, Bruno. Go to your local shelter, adopt a dog. They're the best. Thanks for listening.